What happens when a daytime talk show icon crosses an invisible line and a Hollywood heavyweight refuses to back down? What you're about to hear isn't just another awkward TV moment. It's a collision so intense, it reshaped a legendary show forever. A clash that unfolded live, unscripted, and ended with one of daytime television's most recognizable figures standing up and walking away for good. This is the untold story of how Joy Behar's long-running tenure on The View spiraled into a jaw-dropping finale during what should have been a standard celebrity sit-down. And trust me, if you think you've seen tension on daytime TV before, you haven't seen this. Stay with us because every layer of this moment reveals something even more shocking than the last. And as you watch, ask yourself, what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? The atmosphere inside the View studio was electric as the show returned from commercial. A low buzz rippled through the audience, the kind that signals something big is about to happen. Joy Behar sat in her familiar seat at the Hot Topics table, flipping through her notes one final time. Then she looked straight into camera 2. Longtime viewers knew that look well. It wasn't casual, it was calculated, and it usually meant sparks were about to fly. "Welcome back to The View," Joy said, her unmistakable New York cadence cutting cleanly through the room. Today we're joined by Academy Award winner Kevin Spacey, here to talk about his latest independent film project. Kevin, thanks for being with us. Across the table sat Spacey, sharply dressed in a charcoal gray suit, hands neatly folded, posture composed. He wore the expression of someone who had spent decades mastering the art of public appearances. Calm, reserved, and impenetrable. "Thank you, Joy," he replied evenly. "It's always interesting to be on live television." That single word, interesting, lingered longer than expected. Joy leaned forward, her pen tapping lightly against her notepad. Regular viewers would recognize the signal immediately. This was the moment she stopped following the script. "You know, Kevin, I have to ask," she began, her tone shifting just enough to raise eyebrows. "There's been a lot of conversation lately about accountability in Hollywood. How do you define redemption?" The question hit the room like a sudden chill. For a split second, Spacey's jaw tightened. Barely noticeable, but unmistakable. His practiced smile never faltered. "Well, Joy," he said carefully, "I believe redemption comes from the work we choose to do moving forward. It's about making meaningful contributions and focusing on the craft that brings artists together." But Joy wasn't done. "Is it really that simple?" She pushed, her voice sharper now. "Can someone just decide they've moved on and expect everyone else to follow?" At that moment, the studio fell nearly silent. No laughter, no murmurs. Just anticipation hanging heavy in the air. And this one was only the beginning. Even the other co-hosts could feel it. Joy was drifting far beyond anything discussed in the pre-show meeting. Side glances shot across the table, subtle shifts in posture signaling unease. This wasn't part of the plan, and everyone knew it. Kevin slowly uncrossed his legs and leaned back in his chair. On the surface, his composure remained intact, but his attention had fully locked onto Joy. "I think, Joy," he said evenly, "we live in a society that allows people the opportunity to rebuild their lives. That's what I'm doing, focusing on meaningful work and projects that matter to me." But Joy wasn't satisfied, not even close. "And what about the people who can't just rebuild?" She shot back, her voice rising just enough to cut through the calm. "What about the lives that were impacted by the actions of powerful people in this industry? Don't they deserve more than someone simply saying they've moved on and are focusing on their craft?" The tension in the studio thickened instantly. Camera operators exchanged uneasy looks. In the control booth, a producer could be seen waving frantically, signaling for Joy to pull back. She didn't. If anything, she leaned in harder. Kevin's expression shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The polite smile disappeared, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. "Joy," he said carefully, "I came here to discuss my new film, a project centered on human resilience and artistic expression. I'm not sure what specific situations you're referring to, but I do believe it's important not to make assumptions about people's lives or their motivations." "Oh, I'm not making assumptions," Joy replied sharply, her trademark confrontational tone now in full force. "I'm asking direct questions about accountability, something that seems to be in short supply these days, especially among people who believe their talent gives them a free pass." That was the moment everything changed. Kevin's hands, which had rested calmly in his lap, tightened around the arms of his chair. When he spoke again, his voice carried a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. "Joy, I need to stop you right there," he said, measured but firm. "You're making very serious implications on live television, and I think you need to be extremely careful about the ground you're stepping onto." But Joy was fully committed now. The same combative energy that had made her one of daytime TV's most polarizing figures was on full display. "I am being careful, Kevin," she fired back. "Careful enough to ask the questions that need to be asked, the ones other people may have been too intimidated to bring up." "Intimidated?" Kevin repeated, lifting an eyebrow. "That's an interesting word choice, Joy. Are you suggesting other interviewers were intimidated by me?" "I'm suggesting it's time someone stopped worrying about ruffling feathers," Joy snapped. "Maybe it's time someone finally said what everyone else is already thinking." Then, silence. It stretched across the studio like a wire pulled tight, every second amplifying the discomfort. Kevin didn't speak right away. He simply stared at Joy, his expression unreadable. When he finally broke the silence, his voice was low and dangerous. "And what exactly," he asked, "do you think everyone is thinking, Joy?" The question hung in the air like a dare, and no one was prepared for what came next. By now, Joy's co-hosts weren't even trying to hide their discomfort. They shifted in their chairs, exchanged anxious looks, and subtly leaned away from the confrontation unfolding beside them. The audience could feel it too. This wasn't spirited debate anymore. This was something unraveling in real time. Joy, on the other hand, looked energized. "I think people are wondering how someone can just walk back into the spotlight and expect to be treated like nothing ever happened," she said, her voice steady but charged. "They're asking about accountability, about consequences, about whether talent really gives someone a free pass to move on." Kevin didn't respond immediately. When he did, every word landed with surgical precision, the kind only a veteran actor could deliver. "Joy, let me ask you something," he said, his tone calm but laced with an unmistakable warning. "Do you really want to keep going down this road on live television? Because once we cross that line, there's no turning back, and I'm not convinced you're prepared for where this conversation could end up." The room froze. The implication in his voice was impossible to miss. But if Kevin expected Joy Behar to retreat, he miscalculated badly. Her entire career had been built on refusing to blink. "Are you threatening me, Kevin?" Joy shot back, her words slicing through the tension. "Because if you are, I think our viewers deserve to see exactly who they're dealing with." Kevin let out a soft laugh, short, controlled, and completely humorless. "Threatening you?" he replied coolly. "Joy, I'm trying to save you from yourself. You're stepping into territory you're not equipped to handle, making serious accusations on live television without any regard for the consequences." Joy leaned forward, eyes locked on him. "The only consequences I care about," she fired back, "are what happens when people don't tell the truth. And the truth is, some people think a few interviews are enough to clean up their image and make everyone forget what happened." Kevin tilted his head slightly, his voice dropping into a near whisper, somehow making it even more unsettling. "And what exactly do you think happened, Joy?" he asked, "because I'd really like to hear which version of events you believe you know." Behind the scenes, panic was setting in. Whoopi could be seen making small but urgent hand gestures, silently urging Joy to pull back. Other co-hosts tried to interject, but Joy didn't look away. It was as if the rest of the studio had vanished. "I think powerful people got away with things they never should have," Joy said, her voice rising with every word. "And I think some of those people are now pretending it never happened." Kevin went quiet. He studied Joy for a long, uncomfortable moment. Not angry, not defensive, but calculating. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the chilling authority that once made him one of Hollywood's most unforgettable villains. "Joy," he said slowly, "you're making a very serious mistake. You're confusing having a television platform with having real power. You're confusing being loud with being right." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And you're about to learn the difference." The air in the studio felt heavy, and what happened next would change everything. "Is that another threat?" Joy demanded, her voice now loud enough to echo off the studio walls. "Because I've been threatened by people far more powerful than you, and I'm still standing." "No, Joy," Kevin replied calmly, his composure unshaken. "It's not a threat." He paused. "It's a promise." The studio went completely still. The soft whir of the cameras was the only sound left. Even crew members froze in place, fully aware they were witnessing something that had never happened on daytime television before. "You want to play this game?" Kevin continued. "Then let's play. But let's be clear about the rules." "What rules?" Joy asked. And for the first time, there was a slight tremor in her voice. Kevin smiled. Not warmly, not playfully. It was the kind of smile you'd expect in a psychological thriller. "The rules are simple, Joy. You want to talk about accountability?" he said. "Then let's talk about your accountability. You want to examine people's past actions? Let's examine yours." "My past actions?" Joy laughed, but it sounded forced, hollow. "What are you even talking about?" "I'm talking about a career built on ambush," Kevin replied, his voice gaining strength with every word. "On attacking guests who couldn't fight back. On blindsiding people with accusations they weren't prepared to defend against on live television." Joy's face flushed. "That's called journalism, Kevin. That's called asking the hard questions." "No, Joy," he shot back, now fully commanding the room. "That's called being a bully with a microphone. And the difference between us is this. I'm not going to sit here and let you do it to me." "You can't intimidate me," Joy insisted. But the confidence she'd had moments earlier was slipping. "I'm not trying to intimidate you," Kevin said evenly. "I'm pointing out that if you want an honest conversation about behavior, then we need to be honest. And honestly, Joy, your behavior over the years has been far more damaging than anything I've ever been accused of." The words landed like a punch. Joy's mouth opened, then closed. For a brief moment, she seemed at a loss for words. "How dare you?" she finally said. "How dare you turn this around on me?" "I'm not turning anything around," Kevin replied smoothly. "I'm answering your questions with questions of my own. You asked about accountability. I'm asking about yours. You asked about consequences." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking about the consequences of your actions." Joy's hands clamped onto the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "My actions? I've spent my career speaking truth to power." "Your actions," Kevin repeated, his voice now unmistakably forceful. "The guests you've humiliated with ambush tactics, the careers you've damaged with reckless accusations." The studio felt like it was holding its breath, and the breaking point was closer than anyone realized. "The people who've walked out of this studio feeling humiliated," Kevin continued, his voice unwavering. "Feeling exposed because you believed it made for good television." "That's not," Joy tried to interject. But Kevin didn't stop. "The young actors who came here to promote their very first films and left, Feeling attacked instead, he pressed on, his words stacking like evidence in a courtroom. The politicians who agreed to interviews only to find themselves ambushed by hostility. The authors, the musicians, the directors, people who trusted this show and were met with your particular brand of character assassination. Joy was visibly shaken now. The confidence that had defined her for decades was slipping fast. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but even she sounded unconvinced. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Kevin replied, leaning forward. "Because I've spoken to them, Joy. The industry is much smaller than you think, and people talk." The studio felt frozen in time. "They talk about the fear they feel when they're booked on this show," he continued. "They talk about the anxiety of knowing they might end up on the receiving end of one of your ambush interviews." "That's," Joy began again, her voice cracking. "That's what, Joy?" Kevin asked calmly, pressing harder. "That's not true? Because I can give you names." A sharp inhale rippled through the room. "I can tell you about the young actress who had a panic attack in your green room after you spent 10 minutes tearing into her personal life instead of discussing her work. I can tell you about the musician who refuses to do television interviews to this day because of how he was treated right here." Joy's face drained of color. Her hands trembled slightly on the table. Around her, the other co-hosts glanced desperately toward the control booth, silently pleading for someone to shut this down. "You're lying," Joy whispered. "Am I?" Kevin replied, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Because this is how accountability actually works, Joy. It cuts both ways. If you demand it from others, you don't get to be exempt." He paused, letting every word sink in. "Your actions over the years have been consistently cruel, consistently destructive, and consistently protected by the shield of this show." Suddenly, Joy stood up. Her chair rolled back sharply, the sound echoing through the studio. Her face was a volatile mix of anger and something far more fragile. "I don't have to listen to this," she said, her voice trembling. "No," Kevin agreed calmly. "You don't." He looked at her evenly. "You can walk away. You can do what you've always done when someone finally pushes back. You can run." The word run hung in the air like a challenge no one expected to hear spoken aloud. Joy stood frozen behind the table, her chest rising and falling as she stared at Kevin in disbelief. "Run?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "I've never run from anything in my life." "Haven't you?" Kevin replied, settling back into his chair, calm, confident, and certain he had the upper hand. And in that moment, everything was about to collapse. "What about the interview with the Broadway producer 3 years ago?" Kevin continued, his tone sharp and unrelenting. "The one where you made personal accusations you couldn't substantiate? And the moment he tried to defend himself, the show suddenly went to commercial?" Joy's face drained of color. "That's not what happened," she said weakly. "Or the documentary filmmaker," Kevin pressed on, "the one who came here to talk about her work on women's rights, but instead spent the entire segment defending her personal relationships. And the second she pushed back, you conveniently had technical difficulties." "Stop it," Joy whispered. But Kevin was just getting started. "The environmental activist who came to discuss climate change," he continued, his words accelerating like a runaway train, "but left after you spent 15 minutes interrogating him about his divorce. The cookbook author who broke down in tears on live television because you decided her weight was more compelling than her recipes." The audience sat frozen. "And the teenage science prodigy," Kevin added, lowering his voice for emphasis. "She came here excited to share her research, and then you spent the interview questioning whether her parents had done the work for her." With every example, Joy seemed to collapse inward. Even her co-hosts were staring now, as if seeing her through a new lens. Those were legitimate questions. Joy said, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Were they? Kevin asked quietly. Or were they the questions of someone who confused cruelty with journalism? Someone who believed making people uncomfortable was the same thing as holding them accountable? Joy gripped the back of her chair, her hands visibly shaking. You don't understand what it's like to do this job. I understand exactly what it's like, Kevin replied coldly. I understand performance. I understand maintaining a persona. I understand giving audiences what they expect. He paused. The difference is, my performances don't destroy real people's lives. I've helped people, Joy protested through unsteady breaths. I've given a voice to important issues. You've given a voice to your ego, Kevin shot back. You use this platform to feed your need to dominate the room, to be the one asking the hard questions, regardless of who got hurt along the way. Joy was crying openly now, tears streaming as she struggled to stay composed. You can't say these things to me, she sobbed. Why not? Kevin asked, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its force. Because you're not used to being on this side of the table. You're used to attacking from behind the safety of being the host. I'm done, Joy said suddenly, her voice breaking completely. I'm done with this. Are you? Kevin asked. Because this is what you've done to other people, Joy. This is what it feels like to sit in that chair while someone tears you apart for entertainment, to be ambushed, to be made to feel small and powerless while the host performs for applause. With trembling hands, Joy ripped off her microphone. It clattered loudly against the table. I said I'm done. And that's your choice, Kevin replied calmly. Just like it was their choice to leave, to walk away, to never return to television because of how you treated them. He looked at her steadily. The difference is, they didn't have anywhere to run, they just had to live with it. Shut up, Joy whispered, but the words carried no weight at all. The young mother who came here to talk about her parenting book? Kevin continued relentlessly, and walked out feeling like a failure because you questioned every choice she'd ever made. Joy staggered backward from the table, tears streaking through her mascara. The war veteran who wanted to raise awareness about PTSD, Kevin went on, his voice steady and unforgiving, but instead was interrogated about his personal breakdowns rather than his advocacy. The small business owner who arrived proud of her success and left feeling like a fraud because you implied she didn't deserve it. Stop it, Joy pleaded. Please, just stop. But Kevin didn't. The high school teacher who won a national award and came here excited to talk about education, only to spend the entire segment defending her methods to a hostile audience. The cancer survivor who wanted to share a message of hope, but left feeling reduced to a spectacle because you were more interested in dramatic details than resilience. I helped those people, Joy sobbed. I gave them a platform. No, Kevin corrected firmly. You used them. You used their pain, their vulnerability, their trust, all to manufacture moments that would drive ratings. And when they tried to stand up for themselves, you cut them down even harder. Joy was now near the edge of the stage, her entire body shaking as the weight of it all came crashing down. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, watching the complete unraveling of a woman they had seen dominate television for decades. This isn't who I am, Joy whispered. Isn't it? Kevin asked, his voice now almost gentle, and somehow even more devastating. Because this is who you've been every day for years, someone who decided that other people's pain was acceptable collateral damage for good television. Joy turned toward the exit, but Kevin stopped her one final time. The difference between us, Joy, he said quietly, is that I'm giving you a choice. I'm letting you walk away. I'm not following you backstage. I'm not dragging your personal life into this. I'm not trying to destroy you. He paused. I'm showing you more mercy than you ever showed anyone who sat in that chair. Joy froze in the doorway, her back to the cameras. The studio was dead silent. Then, barely above a whisper, she spoke. "I quit." The words echoed through the room. "I quit The View. I'm done." And with that, Joy Behar walked out of the studio, leaving behind a decades-long career and a legacy forever defined by a single devastating confrontation. Kevin remained seated, calm and composed. He looked directly into the camera as if delivering the final line of a perfectly executed performance. "I think," he said quietly, "we should probably go to commercial." The cameras kept rolling as producers scrambled in panic, capturing every second of what would be remembered as one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Joy Behar had finally met someone who refused to be intimidated. Someone who turned her own tactics against her and forced her to feel exactly what so many others had felt before. And just like that, it was over. So what do you think really pushed Kevin Spacey to that breaking point? Was this a calculated move, or did Joy finally confront the one person who wouldn't back down? Subscribe to the channel and drop your theory in the comments, because this story has far more layers than what played out on screen,